actually came from Samsung Developer Conference that just closed yesterday in San Francisco, so it's kind of a long trip. Aleksei, he is my colleague. He is from Moscow, and so we all came here today to meet you and to tell you something hopefully interesting. So we are, unfortunately, you can't quite see the topic, but I'm sure you saw it in the papers. So we're going to talk about optimizing your Android apps for desktop experience. And there's a few things we're going to do today, including this is what we're going to do at the end of our presentation. So we're going to run a quiz, basically based on all the content we're going to be talking about today. And one of you is going to win Samsung DeX station. Can you please show me who actually knows what Samsung DeX station is? Okay, that's actually encouraging. And so please pay attention, because we're going to be asking questions that are closely related to everything we're going to discuss today. And it's basically online quiz. So let's just kind of set the landscape. Why are we even talking about mobile experience on a desktop? Well, take a look at this picture. So that's a mobile device. I'm sure every one of us in this room has a mobile device in their pocket, right? And why do we like these devices so much? Well, probably one of the best reasons is because they're available. If you need to access your mobile device, you pop it out of the pocket, and it's right here, instantly available. So, and these days, these devices getting so powerful that they can actually perform a lot of the, usual, at least office tasks people do. Editing documents, putting together PowerPoints, presenting. Today, we're actually presenting from my work phone. It's right here. And as you're going to see, you can also use these devices to actually do the coding. In our case, Android coding. But if you really need to do a high-performance task, if you really need to be productive, then most likely you're going to be using a large screen, a keyboard, and a mouse. Because typing a lot of Android code on a little mobile screen is probably not super productive, right? So we tend to stick to our desktop computers or our notebooks to actually do coding. But is it possible to actually marry the both environments, the desktop and the mobile? Well, as you can imagine, that's nothing is impossible these days. But it does take effort, both from companies like Google, who actually did their share to support a desktop environment in Android. They're actually starting with API level 24, which has been introduced about a year ago. You actually have access to the multi-window support in Android. And you can actually experience it on your mobile device without any additional hardware. You can actually launch your apps in so-called free form, as you can see here on the left. Or you can launch a couple of apps in so-called split screen mode. But can you show me hands who are actually using this multi-window support on your Android devices? Not that many people. Why? Well, because it doesn't really change much. We still have a small screen. We still, our input device, it's still our fingers, still not productive. So vendors starting to come up with different hardware solutions. So this is a hardware solution, hardware and software solution from Samsung. It's called Samsung DeX. DeX stands for desktop experience. So basically, it's a hockey puck kind of device where you plug in your phone, connect that device via HDMI cable to your TV, and that's it. And you can actually connect USB keyboard, USB mouse, or connect it via Bluetooth. different ways. But in other words, this is what your Android screen turns into when you plug it in via DeX station to a TV. As you can see, it's a multi-window environment. Windows can be overlapped, they can be sized, resized, and it somewhat looks similar to all other desktop environments. You have your icons, you have your taskbar, notifications, and that's where it actually starts getting productive. And Aleksei is going to show you today how it actually works in real life. This is, it's a bit fake, but I didn't send it right now. But this is something that you absolutely cannot have when you work with notebooks or PC-based desktops. Integration of telephony with your work environment. You can't receive SMS messages to your notebooks, right? But here you can actually, in addition to other ways of interacting with your colleagues, you can actually add telephony to your user experience, which is really nice. So at this point, perhaps you're intrigued. That sounds interesting. But as they say, a picture is worth 1,000 words, but a good demo is worth 1,000 pictures. So let's go ahead and actually see how it works. And specifically, our topic today is what you need to pay attention to when you build your apps for desktop environment, because there's a few considerations that you need to keep in mind to make those apps work efficiently on a desktop. So fortunately, we don't have to unplug and rewire anything. All we have to do is to click escape button to exit our PowerPoint presentation and basically fall down to Android desktop. So here it is. And Aleksei, you can have my mic.
Hello, my name is Aleksei. I'm a software developer, and when I code something, I'm listen ambient music. But now there are no any ambient music, and I run ambient video.
These days, every topic is controversial, but everybody likes it. So that's
So now let's open development environment. So I open Android IDE. Up your hand who any know about it or use it before. Okay, not so much, but
probably use it on tablets, right? Yes. Well, now they actually we've partnered with them, and they've optimized this app for desktop environment. As you can see, it's getting really useful.
Okay, main advantage is you can build and run application on one device. Okay, let's show how it works. Yes, I run our demo application. It's a simple memo pad. It contains edit box, and so I'm going to show features that work in standard of desktop mode. First of them, it's keyboard and keyboard shortcuts: Ctrl-A, Ctrl-C, and Ctrl-V, Ctrl-Z are working on the shelf. And
this behavior you get right out of the box. All the basic keyboard shortcuts are supported without pretty much any effort. You will put your edit text view, and this behavior comes standard.
Okay, but also you can customize behavior and add Ctrl plus and Ctrl minus to zoom out and zoom in. Also, mouse behavior with Ctrl plus and Ctrl minus is okay. Next, to show you drag and drop that is supported in standard of desktop mode. Now let me send SMS message. And I'm show you how to drag and drop text files. Oh, no text files, plain text. Okay. Okay.
So that's exactly what I was talking about. Aleksei just sent an SMS message to this device, and he, copied the content and somehow used it in this presentation.
And as I promised, drag and drop of text. Okay, it works. But also you can implement drag and drop for files. Now I show how you can drag and drop text files. Okay.
So this is a custom behavior. So dragging and dropping text from a browser, for example, or from another edit view is again supported right out of the box. But if you want to build custom drag and drop, like what Aleksei just showed you, you actually have to do a bit of a code tweaking. But let's show just a few items.
Okay, next feature is right-click and contextual menu. So as you can see, some feature is standard, is cut, copy, share, and select all, and some is customized. For example, immersive mode. Let me enable it. So you can run your application at full screen. It's useful for game developers, for example. Okay, now let me show code of application. For example, open on-track listener. It's a standard feature of Android SDK, and with this feature we can implement drag and drop files. First of all, we check MIME type, and if it text, then process inserting of text. Next feature that I should mention, it's place it in manifest, Android manifest file, and there is checked resizable activity. You should be sure it's always true. If it's not declare or declare false, spell. Let's see what is how it works if it falls. Okay, activity is not resizable more, and you can only switch between portrait and landscape modes.
So guys, this is what we call running mobile application on a desktop environment. So that application, we cannot call that app. Aleksei, can you please show that? See, it's not resizable. You can only turn it portrait or landscape. And this app hasn't been optimized for a desktop environment. And in this case, the optimization is really simple. You just need to flip that attribute value. But the idea is instead of deploying mobile apps to a large screen, actually try to think about building the true desktop applications. So your users are not constrained to the old mobile interface.
Okay, I read activity resizable, and you can see you can maximize and resize activity. So any feature is I want to tell about is different layouts and resources for desktop mode and mobile mode. As you can see, there are two sets of layouts for desktop mode and phone mode. Let's show how our application run in phone mode. So I just switch to phone mode.
So DeX Station supports two different modes. Actual screen mirroring. In screen mirroring, you actually see the mobile screen on a large screen. See, that's just your mobile interface. So and as you can see, the layout is different because we used two different layouts, one for mobile mode, one for desktop mode. So as you can see, since we don't have an extra real estate here, there's no blue sidebar that explains something about the API we used. So that's actually one of the techniques that you can use to make provisions for a different layout when your app runs in a desktop mode. So now we're switching back to DeX.
Now switching back to DeX, and when we switching between DeX and phone mode, all applications are closing and should be restarted.
See, now we have that sidebar because, again, we use different layouts. Aleksei, can you please open YouTube again?
Okay.
And just play something. Yeah, politically correct kittens. Yeah, and you can play them. And can you overlap the other window on top of it? Look what's happening here, guys. You know, when you play YouTube on your mobile phone, the minute you open another app that goes on top of it, it basically stops the playback. But not here. So what's the secret? Well, the secret is the developers who put together this optimized YouTube app that's optimized for multi-window environment, they just chose not to pause the video on a on-pause callback method. You know, like in activity, we have on-pause, and that's where they would usually stop the playback. But in a multi-window mode, perhaps that doesn't make much sense. You can still continue the video playback because you can see parts of the screen, parts of that activity. So that's another thing that you may choose to implement differently in your app if you're building it for the desktop environment as well. Okay, so we actually, I think the only thing that we need to show, Aleksei, is in case if you absolutely love to use Android Studio and you don't want to switch to a IDE app to code, you can still do that. But you may ask, but Android Studio doesn't work on Android. Well, what if we use a virtual desktop solution? There's a number of VDI-based solutions. This one is from our partners from Citrix. So basically what I'm doing here, I'm connecting to a virtual desktop somewhere on the cloud that runs Windows. Yeah. Can you even tell that this is actually Android phone that projects this screen? It's I think it's Windows Server 2008, and this is my Android Studio that runs here. Depending on your Wi-Fi, the response time is pretty good. You actually feel like you're working locally on Windows computer in this particular case. So we actually have a number of virtual desktop solutions from our partners. This one's from Citrix, but there's also Amazon Workspaces and NetWare. So depending on your preferences, you may use one or the other. And of course, you won't be able to deploy the APK file from over the cloud to a local device, but you can always use Git, for example, to sync your code. OK. So let's go back to our DeX environment. And I think that's pretty much all we wanted to show you at this point in terms of the demos. Let's talk about some optimization stuff. Aleksei, can you please go back to presentation and yeah, this one. And go to the presentation mode. All right, I'll click through. OK, so when you're thinking about supporting desktop environment, and by the way, it's a good thing to think about because it's nothing that's proprietary to Samsung. This idea actually has been around for a while, being able to use your mobile device to run desktop environment. It hasn't been successful previously, but it doesn't mean that it's not going to be successful in the future because the idea is right, and maybe you heard the announcement from other vendors just a few days ago that they support a similar mode, desktop mode from their devices as well. So that's basically indication that this is where the Android world is going. So when you build an app that's supposed to work on a desktop environment, always think about building a true desktop application rather than deploying a mobile app on a large screen. So what that really means, it means that you need to make provisions for extra space that's available. And what's interesting, sometimes it results in totally different screen flow. So it doesn't mean that if you have 10 activities that you implement to support your mobile user experience, it doesn't mean that you're going to have 10 activities. They're not going to necessarily translate one-to-one. Maybe with the desktop experience, you're going to end up with 5 activities or 2 activities, or maybe even 1, because you have lots of space, you have your keyboard and a mouse, and you can do way more than on a confined mobile screen. So in addition to extra screen space, you have freely resizable activities. No longer you are confined to portrait or landscape mode. They can be square, or they could stretch to a tiny little thin line. So you need to be able to adjust your layouts fluidly to do that. We actually seen examples when people build their apps in assumption that it's always going to run, let's say, in a landscape mode, when they deploy such app to a desktop environment, things start going to look ugly. So you actually need to think about optimizing for desktop right from the beginning. Mouse navigation and keyboard navigation. So no longer your user interaction is restricted to fingers and finger-based gestures. Now you have a physical keyboard that comes with lots of shortcuts. As Aleksei showed, some shortcuts supported right out of the box, but you can also customize your shortcuts as well. And mouse navigation, again, all these pop-up, contextual pop-up menus, you can actually make a much bigger use of those compared to the mobile device. Now the good news. The good news is that it's a new technology. Yeah, it's something that we perhaps haven't seen before, but there's nothing proprietary in this technology. It's not like we're asking you to create dependencies on some Samsung APIs. All this is based on good, best Android practices. Basically, all you have to do to build an app that supports a desktop environment, go to developer.android.com and read about their, multi-window support for Android. Specifically, don't use physical pixels, use density pixels in your layouts. Use alternative resources for desktop mode and for mobile mode. Handle runtime configuration changes. In Android, every time you flip your phone from portrait to landscape, you know that Android kills the activity, restarts it. Well, with DeX, with desktop environment, you actually get a few more activities that are counted as configuration change. Specifically, every time you resize your activity, it goes through configuration change, gets killed, restarted. When you maximize it, gets killed, restarted. When you dock your phone to the DeX station, when you take it out, your activity goes through the same cycle. Not when you minimize it, though. Think about the quiz, okay? So be smart about on pause. Remember, like in case with the kittens, you don't necessarily have to stop some of the activities that you perform within your code. And perhaps there's a new configuration qualifier. You know how we use qualifiers for Android resources? Well, there's a new qualifier, desk. So basically, if you would like to use certain layouts or certain drawables in a desktop mode, that's your qualifier. If you would like to use a screen density qualifier, then use MDPI, because that's currently the qualifier that will be used when your app runs in a desktop mode, at least on Samsung DeX station. And just to give you a few ideas about this little device here called DeX Station, it's basically sized as a hockey puck. It has 2 USB ports where you can plug in pretty much anything that's supported by Android. I actually plugged in my clicker in one of the USB ports, and I plugged my radio receiver for the wireless keyboard and a mouse into the other port. It has Ethernet port, which is extremely important. In fact, we were actually talking about it during the Samsung Developer Conference. One of the attempts by another vendor who also introduced the same idea, basically, switching to a desktop environment from their mobile phone, they failed in the enterprise because they were pitching it to the enterprises, but they failed for one very good reason. They didn't support Ethernet network connections. Because once all the people come to the office, they immediately jump on a Wi-Fi, and they just clog their Wi-Fi network. Okay, so we actually made provision for the Ethernet, to address that issue. And currently, we do have HDMI out port, and currently it supports full HD. But we're probably not going to stop at this resolution. We are continuously working to improve these technologies, so stay tuned. And currently, you can also only use Samsung Galaxy S, S8 Plus, and Note 8 with this device. There's a little reminder for me at the top about Samsung Knox. Can you show me hands who actually heard about Samsung Knox? OK. So Samsung Knox is basically a secure platform that's built into the hardware of our flagship devices. And what it is, it basically adds military-grade security. That's pretty much all you need to know, again, for the quiz. With DeX, nothing changes. You can still use that military-grade security with our phones. DeX is basically just about providing desktop experience. Security-wise, platform-wise, it's still the same device. OK, so there's a number of questions that we historically receive when we talk about DeX in a desktop mode. First question is how to determine that you are actually in a desktop mode within your code. Like, for example, if you want to implement different on-pause behavior, how do you actually tell whether you run in mobile mode or in a desktop mode? You can use numbers of ways. You can use, analyze, subscribe and analyze to certain broadcasts, or you can query configuration, Android configuration object dynamically in your code. Another question is about controlling the dimensions of the launch window. Like, is there any way to specify the actual size of the window and maybe the minimum width, minimum height, maximum dimensions? Yes, there are, and you can do it declaratively in a manifest or programmatically as well. And this is one of the favorite ones. You may ask, well, if I'd like to actually debug my application that runs in a desktop mode, how do I actually do that? Like right now the device is plugged into the DeX station, but if you want to use your notebook to build the code and then deploy the APK to this device, it almost sounds like you have to unplug it, plug it to the cable, deploy the APK, then plug the device back to the DeX station. You actually don't have to do that. ADB, Android Debug Bridge, does support deployment over Wi-Fi or Ethernet. And perhaps this is something I can show you. So give me a second. Unfortunately, I cannot show you the second screen with my notebook, but this is my notebook, and what I'm going to do, I am going to deploy the app. I've modified it slightly. I changed the background color. Can you minimize this, please? Okay, so well, on this screen, I don't think it quite supports the multitude of colors. Did it refresh? Okay. Well, one of the demos had to fail, so this one doesn't quite work well. But yeah, I'm not connected to my physical device. Just run ADB TCP/IP 5555. That would launch the TCP listener on a mobile device, and then use ADB connect and get the IP address from the phone, and magically you can deploy remotely. Okay, let's go back to our presentation. Let's see what's left. All right, so that's where we were. Okay, clicking through. So that's basically the top 3 questions we are being asked all the time. So now resources. Where do I go from here? So again, developer.android.com. That's your primary resource because, again, there's nothing proprietary in this technology. But we also, there's a developer.samsung.com site. That's where we provided basically copy and paste examples that you can use to maybe do some tweaks in your code. And with 10 minutes left, we actually have, we're going to do a couple of things. First, we're going to run the quiz. And the way it's going to run, we are, yeah, you can do the full screen. Yeah, click on Classic. So basically, guys, you need to pull your mobile devices, go to kahoot.it, and enter this game pin. And then you'll be joining, and we'll see you right on the screen. It's actually quite cool. It even comes with nice music. "29 players. Hold on, let's see if one more. Okay. Anybody else? We're all set? Okay, so you have 11 questions to answer. Basically, what counts is the accuracy of the answer as well as the speed. So that's your first question. Okay, so those who picked the brown one got it right. And currently we have Salmon at the top. Let's see. Okay, so FireWire is the port that we don't have. Yes, absolutely right. So starting from SDK 24 or aka Android N or Android Nougat, that's where we have multi-window support in Android. You're right. Resizable activity equals true. Okay, excellent. So it's a bit tricky question, guys. So if you explicitly state in the manifest that your app has to have a touchscreen support, that app is not going to even open in desktop mode because you can't really get the touch events through the HDMI cable back to the device. Excellent. You really don't have to do anything to be able to run your app in a desktop mode. But of course, it's nice to enhance the user experience and add some of the keyboard and mouse-based interaction. We have a leader. So if you want to do mouse-based zoom, it's actually a custom behavior that you need to implement. Okay, let's go to the next one. Alt-tab actually does work. Control plus. Remember, Aleksei showed zooming in, zooming out using keyboard shortcuts. That was custom behavior, and it doesn't work off the shelf. Okay, we're getting closer to the end. Two more questions. That should be an easy one. MDPI. Desk is the proper resource qualifier, but it's not a density resource qualifier. It's a UI mode qualifier. That was a bit of a trick here. Okay, we got the change of leaders. Yeah, you were listening. When you minimize, nothing happened. And I think the last question. All the security, remember we were talking about security features only. Knox has, there's some UI interactions as well you can do with Knox.
I have one simple question, because actually if we are working on the DeX station and Android phone, I see that it can be possibly our future of work. And do the big players like plan to deploy their environments, their programs to DeX? Is there any interest, like Android Studio, I don't know, PowerPoint, I don't know, Photoshop or something like that?
Yeah, Adobe is actually already optimized Lightroom and tons of their apps for desktop environment. All Microsoft Office suite, I think it's called Office 365. It's all optimized for desktop. Citrix, VMware, Amazon Workspaces. We actually have tons. Blue Jeans conferencing. What's the other one? Aleksei, what's the other conferencing app that we support? Blue Jeans, and well, in other words, they are investing in it. Yeah, and a good example, a good proof that this is not only going to be available on Samsung devices is that you can actually deploy Android apps on a Chromebook, Google Chromebook, and that's exactly the type of optimizations that you need to perform. Actually, we did a webinar where Adobe joined, and they said that they killed actually two birds with one stone. They've optimized their app, and it now works in desktop environment on both DeX Station and Chromebook, which I think exactly what you're asking. Okay, thank you. Any more questions, guys?
Do you know anything about similar hardware as DeX coming from different manufacturers?
Of course we know.
So the question was, do you know of any similar hardware coming from different manufacturers similar to DeX? Yeah, well, of course we do, because we're watching the market. I think Huawei just recently announced that they have a dongle where you can plug a Huawei device and it will do similar things. So I think right now we're basically leading the pack of manufacturers who do that, but we think that in about a year there'll be pretty much all the vendors will be supporting desktop mode, because it just makes a lot of sense, right? Yes, please.
If the DeX station eventually will be compatible with non-Samsung devices, or will it remain a Samsung exclusivity?
DeX station currently only works with Samsung devices, though I heard, because really what DeX station does, it triggers something on a phone to replace Android launcher. That's what it does. Plus, it has a little fan at the back to cool the phone, because when you play games, it gets really hot. Plus, it has charger and some little conveniences. So technically, any manufacturer who has USB-C slot at the bottom, they can probably build, recognize the event and do something. So we only build it for Samsung devices. We didn't partner with anybody else, but it's hard to say that somebody wouldn't use this hardware as well. Any other questions, guys? Well, I think we finished with 3 minutes over the limit, and thank you very much for your attention.